This is the Community Builder Podcast. I'm your host, Travis King. This week, I sit down with James Carbary. James is the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcasting agency for B2B brands. James is also the co-host of the B2B Growth Show. B2B Growth is a daily podcast dedicated to helping B2B marketing leaders achieve explosive growth. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the Community Builder Podcast, and today I have James Carbary on with us. How you doing, James?
I am fantastic, man. Super stoked to be a guest on this show and excited to see this thing come to life.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm super excited as well. Really, want to give listeners a quick intro into, who you are, and then kind of dive into, how you're currently building community. And, we'll kind of hopefully end on some ideas where we can, provide these listeners with some actionable insights that they can take back and actually use in their community building efforts. How does that sound?
Man. Yeah, I love it.
Cool. But yeah, so just, I guess, start by just letting everybody know who you are and kind of what you're currently up to.
Yeah, man. So I started Sweetfish Media 3.5 years ago. We started off as a blog writing shop. And over the course of the first year in business, realized that there was an enormous opportunity in the niche of podcasting for B2B brands, not in the way that most people think about podcasting. I think most people think about it from an audience development standpoint. They think about podcasting. They think about the value of podcasting in terms of the listeners that you can reach. And I actually didn't care at all about listeners. I only cared about the relationships that I was building with guests, because I had done shows in the past where my guests actually ended up turning into clients. And so I had this kind of epiphany 10 months into to starting Sweetfish, where I said, man, if I just ask my ideal clients to be a guest on a podcast, they all say yes. And then once they've been on a show and we've collaborated and created content together, they're much more likely to actually want to do business with me. And so we pivoted from being a blog writing shop into being a podcast agency. Written content is a big part of what we do. So we repurpose audio into LinkedIn content and blog posts and stuff like that. But that's the bulk of what we do. We podcasting and we repurpose that audio content into different forms of content. That's the nuts and bolts of what Sweetfish is. And then I'm also a contributor for Entrepreneur. We've turned our guests from B2B growth into a community in and of itself. So I've started doing these B2B growth dinners all across the country. I'm going to Cleveland in 2 days to meet up with some customers, some guests, some potential guests, potential customers. And so kind of taking the show on the road, if you will, which is a huge part of why we're talking, because I'm also passionate about community building and the impact that it's had on our business.
Awesome, James. Yeah, I think, that actually leads us right into one of the first topics I want to talk about is, what does community mean to you? Right? Like you're in this, B2B podcasting world. And in a sense, it's not really easily to quantify, a quote unquote community. So I'd love to hear your, what community means to you in your, world.
Yeah, man. I was just talking about this concept with a couple guys at lunch today. I think community is friendship. And that sounds fluffy. And I think it can be, I don't know. I don't think we talk enough about treating people like friends treat each other. And I think the rub there is, well, James, how do you can't scale friendships, because friendships require, tons of time and lots of effort to nurture like real friendships. But I think if we treat the people that we're interacting with in a business context, our community, if you will, if we treat those people, we may not have, my buddy that I go to lunch with twice a month, I'm obviously going to get more time with him than I am with the person that listens to our podcast. And I maybe only interact with them via a LinkedIn comment once or twice a year. But regardless, like if you treat people as if they were your friend sitting across the table at lunch from you, I think you can scale community really well by doing that. And so that's what community is to me. It's I want to have as many friendships as I possibly can. And when I think about friendship, I think there's no agenda. I genuinely want to be as helpful as I can to my friends. I want my friends to win in life, in business, in their marriage, in everything they do. And so whether I'm having lunch with them or whether I'm interacting with them on LinkedIn or whether they're a guest on my show, I have a genuine care for that person like I would a friend. And so that's what community means to me.
Interesting. No, I think that's great. Like it's tough, right? Like how do you align, your friends with business? Right?
Yeah.
Like where's that line of separation exist for you? If
Yeah,
at all.
I think a lot of my friends have become customers because because of my approach to nurturing relationships, and in the process of treating people like they are your friend, people actually want to end up doing business with you. And so I think we can press into that more than what a lot of people are comfortable pressing into. And one of my friends is a keynote speaker, and he's a world-renowned magician, and now he teaches companies how to give the same reaction that people have to his magic, how you can create those similar moments for your customers, for your employees. And this idea of creating magic moments, the idea that he talks about a lot, is all contingent on active listening. And so when you're going through your business endeavors, whether you're in biz dev or you're whatever area of the company that you're in, where you're trying to build community, as you're talking to the individuals in that community, you can listen for opportunities for you to wow them. And so when someone tells you they're about to have a baby, putting a reminder in your phone to say, hey, I'll text them next Tuesday after I know they've had their baby, and ask how the baby's doing. That costs you nothing, but that's what you would do for a friend. Just because they're not necessarily somebody that you're going to eat lunch with once a week doesn't mean that you can't take that extra step, make that extra effort. And by doing those kind of things on a regular basis, you wind up, I think, humanizing. I think a lot of times, especially at bigger organizations, it's easy to think about community in terms of the masses. And if you've got a big community, it's hard to think about each individual as a part of that community. But I think when you do, and you start actively listening to the people in your community and start creating magic moments with different people in your community, it winds up having an impact on the growth of the community and the depth, the culture that you're setting in that community for people amongst each other to start treating each other as if they're friends with one another, which is ultimately better for your community. Like if everybody in your 1,000-person community is becoming friends with other people in the community, that helps you, the organization organizing the community, win more. So I don't know if that makes sense. Feels like I'm rambling a bit, but that's the idea.
No, I think it makes complete sense, right? Like this concept of friendship and just doing as you would to any of your friends is treating them the same way you treat your clients. And I think that makes total sense. And I think one thing I also want to ask about that, in terms of like building this like offline or in real life community, like how do you distinguish that, right? Like, because I know you earlier mentioned like a LinkedIn post, right? Like there's a sense of commenting on Facebook or commenting on Instagram or LinkedIn, but then there's also this offline community building. Like, could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. So we did our podcast for about 2 years before I decided to start doing these B2B growth dinners. And I was noticing that we were building a really cool community. That community was manifesting itself on our email list, and they were showing up in comment threads on my LinkedIn content. But I was like, man, I get joy from being around people in real life. That is what fires me up. That is what brings me life. And so as an entrepreneur, the reason you get into entrepreneurship is for the freedom and the flexibility of it. At least that's my primary motivation. I don't care about the money. That's going to be nice and fun, but to me, it's about the freedom that it brings me and having the autonomy to be able to do the things that fire me up. So for me, being around people fires me up. And so as I thought, man, how can I bake this into our business? We've got this thriving community digitally. How can I make in-person interactions be a part of this? So we put a little ad spot at the end of our episodes of B2B Growth that said, hey, we want to create friendships amongst this community. And so I'm going to be hitting the road and going to be in different parts of the country every month. I think I've done 9 or 10 of these now. You and I met as one of these for lunch last week when I was in New York City because of that. And so you signed up. You said, yeah, when you're in New York City, hit me up, and we did. And I ended up getting to meet with you and 7 or 8 other people while I was in New York City on these kind of one-off lunches and dinners with a couple people here and there. And to me, like the business benefit has, I mean, we've done thousands of dollars in revenue just in the last few months because of turning the community that we've built digitally into an in-person community as well. And it adds a level of depth to a relationship with someone that I can't explain. Like, they can listen to me on a podcast for, years, but when we sit down and share a meal together, sit across the table from one another, it expedites that relationship in ways that I don't think you can do in any other way.
Totally. And that's exactly where I wanted to go next, is the importance of that human to human interaction in real life, and kind of also gives some advice to other people, right? Like, there are other people that are going to be podcasters that also have a similar challenge, right? They have audience and listeners all over the world. And so how can other people that are building community online, like, activate their online communities offline? Like, what types of things would you recommend?
I mean, I think going to where they are, if you're going to be traveling and going to conferences and meeting up with customers, creating some sort of infrastructure inside your digital community where you say, "Hey, I'm traveling a lot. I want to meet up with you guys when I'm in your neck of the woods," and having a landing page. We just have a Google form. I mean, it's nothing fancy whatsoever. I bought a domain, b2bgrowthdinners.com, and we share that domain on the podcast. People go to that domain, which takes them directly to a Google form. And that's an ongoing thing. So every episode of our show is promoting that URL, which, so every day we're getting new people signing up. So whenever I find out, like, hey, I'm going to be in New York City or I'm going to Minneapolis, I send a note to everyone on my list that is in that area. And just like that, I can have, 3 or 4 different meetups in the city that I'm already going to. And I can humanize our community in that way by having these in real life interactions. And so that's how I've done it. I'm sure there are a gajillion other ways to do it, but I think it is super smart to have some sort of infrastructure where people can sign up anytime, not just like not getting people to sign up when you're going to an area, but having right. Some sort of infrastructure where it's like, hey, I might be in your city in the next 3 or 4 months, sign up here and I'll let you know when I get there. I think that model has ended up being really beneficial for me.
Right. It's kind of just like this, like, gauging interest and then understanding like kind of where to go next to also help you plan your traveling as well. I like that.
Exactly.
Nice. Also too, like, as I'm thinking about, some of the challenges, right? Like, as I'm thinking about this, like, some people might be like, Travis, James, like, I don't have boots on the ground in 50 different cities. Like, I have listeners all over the world, but like, I'm only one human. Like, what sort of challenges have you faced in this similar effort, right? Like, you can't be everywhere at once. Like, what other challenges have come across in your, like, in real life community building efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. And I think the fundamental flaw in that line of thinking is you can't be everywhere at once. And so not holding yourself to a standard of, we get 75,000 downloads a month on our show. I can't meet with that many people. Like, that's not realistic, but I can meet with 10 people when I'm in New York City, and I can meet with 7 people when I'm in Minneapolis, and I can meet with another 4 people when I'm in San Francisco, and I can meet with another 12 people when I'm in Austin. And I can do what I can do. And so I think the biggest challenge for me has been people bailing because people are busy. And so when I set up a lunch or a dinner, inevitably people, hey, my kid got sick, or I try to set up these pretty intimate events where they're dinners or lunches with, just a handful of folks. And so at first my fear was, man, if I only have 5 people at this thing and 3 people bail, it's going to be lame if it's just 2 people that show up, and then I'm going to look stupid and I'm not going to look like I'm worth anything because this person showed up and there's only one other person there. But what I realized is those are actually some of the most valuable meetups, is when it's just, when you and I met up, one other guy wasn't able to come because he had a last minute meeting pop up, and it was just you and I, and we ended up having a fantastic conversation. I actually got more joy out of it just being you and I at lunch than had there been 3 or 4 other people there. And so I think knowing that like the amount of people there, depending on what your goals are, I think being okay with, even if you just meet up with one person, that can be incredibly valuable, has helped me overcome the fear of, oh my gosh, I'm going to organize these things and nobody's going to show up. One thing that I'm starting to introduce is allowing the people that I'm inviting to bring someone else. And so when they bring someone else, they're obligated to show up because they invited somebody else to it. So that's like a little tactic that I'm experimenting with right now, to make sure that we have, we don't have more kind of events where very few people show up, even though I do think it is. I think it can still be a great experience if only 1 or 2 people show up. But, I'm trying to get the most out of my time in a particular city. And if I want to meet up with, 10 or 11 people while I'm there, inviting 5 people to a dinner and then having them invite one person kind of will help that. So that's one little hack that I'm experimenting with.
Nice. It's like my idea. Like the way I think of it is like that +1 strategy, right? Like you said, you're more obligated to, show up if someone else is also on the hook for showing up with you.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, nice. So I guess one last quick question. I know as we're kind of running down towards the ladder of the interview. As far as the like future of community goes, right? Like so many people I talk with, they talk about like, oh my God, like so many people are, we're in the attention economy, right? Like everybody's fighting over attention no matter what it is. Can you talk to a little bit of kind of what your outlook is on the future of community building and how important or valuable it will be to B2B brands to make sure they have some sort of community infrastructure planned for?
Yeah, man, I think it's everything. I think community building and brand building are almost one and the same, to be honest. I was just talking with my friend Sangram, who's built a movement called Flip My Funnel as a part of his company, Terminus, which is an ABM platform, and just talking about how community building is brand building. Like you are building trust at scale by creating a community around a cause that other people care about. And I think in community is how you make strides towards solving big problems. Like it's really, really hard. Elon Musk isn't able to do the things Elon Musk can do just in and of himself. He's built communities of people that get behind this idea of like, we need to be able to inhabit Mars. And so through that, like he can't do that on his own. It's bigger than himself. And so you as a B2B brand thinking about what is the problem we're trying to solve, we have to lock arms with other people that want that desired result as well. And if you're the person organizing that community and spearheading the activity, you're the one throwing the events, bringing the people together. You host the podcast that features the experts and other people that have thoughts around how to solve that problem. Like when you're the person doing all that, you're going to reap a ton of the benefit, because you're the tip of the spear on creating the movement that is ultimately trying to solve that problem. And I think the way you do that is by building community. The episode that I was doing this morning with Sangram, we were talking about how most people see a problem and then they build a product and then they expect that product to change the world. But when you look at Salesforce, when you look at HubSpot, when you look at Terminus and Drift, you look at all these B2B brands specifically that have made huge strides in tackling massive problems. They started not with a product, but they started with community. And then they allowed community to shape the product that ended up being the thing that changed the world. And so I think that line of thinking is absolutely necessary.
Totally. I know that's super, super impactful. I think that's an awesome way to look at it. Yeah, I just wanted to, again, thank you for hopping on, James. This has been such a pleasure to have you on the show and kind of, get your insights and your takes on some different ways of looking at community and kind of how you're looking at it in your world. And also just for the other people listening, kind of where can they follow up with you, stay in touch with you, connect with you after the show?
Yeah, so I'm all over LinkedIn. You can just search James Carbary, Carbary on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at James Carbary. Email is james@sweetfishmedia.com. You can check out what we're doing at Sweetfish. Just go to sweetfishmedia.com. So all over the internet. and would love to connect with anybody and everybody that wants to connect.
Awesome. Well, James, thanks again for hopping on. And I guess until next time.
Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks for listening to the Community Builder Podcast with Travis King. If you like the show and want to know more, check out communitybuildershow.com or leave me a review on iTunes. Join me next week when I sit down with Jason Gaynard.